Welcome to the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Friday, July 15th. This is Gina McGuire. Over the next week, we'll have several impacts that will affect fire potential across the Great Basin. The first being an increase in winds with low relative humidity across Nevada and Utah as we move through this weekend. These winds will start increasing a little bit today across the area, but really start increasing, especially over southern Utah into southeast Nevada as we go through Saturday and Sunday. And then winds will increase over western and northern Nevada as we move through Sunday and Monday. These winds will continue through Monday across the Great Basin with low relative humidity. Also, lightning will start returning to the southern half of Utah as we move into Sunday and increase and spread north as we move through next week. Therefore, this return of lightning after warm and dry conditions, especially across Utah into the eastern half of the Great Basin, will likely increase fire potential. Over the last 24 hours, we've seen no showers and thunderstorms across the Great Basin, with only light fire activity reported across mainly Utah, but also a few small fires reported across Idaho, Wyoming, and to western Nevada. Over the last 7 days to 4 weeks, we've seen generally dry conditions over Nevada and Utah over the last week, with the precipitation focused mainly over the central Idaho mountains, with also lighter precip dipping down into far northern Nevada. Over the last 30 days, the image on the right shows the percent of normal precipitation, and you can see these large areas over western and northern Nevada and over northern Utah that have been dry over the last month, and even areas that have seen precipitation have generally seen below normal precipitation, with the exception of parts of the southern areas of the Great Basin, which did see rainfall a couple of weeks ago. How this has changed the ERCs across the area: we generally were seeing moderate conditions on Sunday. However, after these warm and dry conditions, we've seen ERCs increase above the 80th or 90th percentile over much of Utah, into eastern Nevada, and now over western Nevada, and even ERCs increasing above the 70th percentile across southern Idaho. So you can see after these warm and dry conditions in July how quickly the ERCs are changing across the area. Looking at live fuel moisture, we've seen a significant decrease in live fuel moisture, especially across Nevada and Utah after very warm and dry conditions. The water vapor satellite loop from this morning shows high pressure dominating the southwest and the southern half of the Great Basin, with temperatures now above normal. However, an area of low pressure will move across northern Idaho, and this will allow winds to increase somewhat across the Great Basin and bring the potential for isolated showers or thunderstorms to the central Idaho mountains. The rest of the Great Basin will remain dry. Another area of low pressure will drop down the west coast as we move through this weekend and next week, and this will allow for a further increase in winds and also allow moisture to start returning from the southwest, which will see thunderstorms developing across the eastern half of the Great Basin. Today, fire potential will remain low to moderate across the region and very low over parts of central Idaho mountains due to recent moisture. Looking at the winds today and relative humidity, single-digit relative humidity will continue across much of Nevada into Utah, with relative humidity slightly higher further north. Winds today will increase from what we saw yesterday. However, most gusts will remain around 30 miles per hour, with the strongest winds over the eastern half of the Great Basin. As we move into Saturday, low pressure tracks into Montana, pushing any shower activity further east, with dry southwest flow starting to increase again across the Great Basin as low pressure starts to drop down the west coast. Therefore, we will see an increase in winds over mainly the southern half of Utah into southern Nevada, increasing fire potential. These winds will start increasing again to near 40 miles per hour or even higher, especially over the Arizona Strip into southern Utah, and winds will remain low to moderate across the rest of the Great Basin, and relative humidity will remain very low. As we move into Sunday and this trough deepens along the west coast, we'll see a further increase in the winds across the eastern half of the Great Basin and across western and northern Nevada. Therefore, we will continue to see increase in fire potential for winds and relative humidity. And also, as this southwest flow increases, it will push moisture into the southern half of Utah, increasing the risk for thunderstorms. And after the very warm and dry period we saw with high ERCs, this will increase fire potential and will likely see new fire starts. Looking at the conditions on Sunday, again, single-digit relative humidity will continue across Nevada into western Utah, with a slight increase in RH as thunderstorms develop over the southern and southeastern half of Utah. Again, as these thunderstorms increase, we'll still be dealing with stronger winds. Therefore, these storms will be moving a little bit faster and likely won't produce the wetting rains over widespread areas that we saw during the last push of the monsoon. So again, we'll be watching those areas of lightning over the southern half of Utah. Also, winds will be increasing over western and northern Nevada, which will increase fire potential there if we see new ignitions. The forecast amount of precipitation over the next 3 days is generally very light or non-existent across the Great Basin. However, as we get into Sunday, we may see some light amounts over parts of southeast Utah. However, again, due to the faster storm movement, this will likely limit wetting rains in many areas initially. As we move into early next week, we have a deep trough off the west coast, which will continue the gusty winds across the Great Basin and also will allow temperatures to cool somewhat over western and northern areas. However, again, this will continue that push of moisture across the eastern half of the Great Basin, with the continued risk for thunderstorms further north on Monday over the eastern half of Utah. Also, these gusty winds will continue to increase fire potential as well. Therefore, if we see new starts in the drier western areas, we will see increased potential for fire spread due to the winds, and we also see the potential for new ignitions with still gusty winds over the eastern half of the Great Basin. Again, these thunderstorms will be a mix of wet and dry as they will be moving. On Tuesday, we'll continue to see that moisture over the eastern half of Utah. Therefore, thunderstorms will continue to be a threat, but we may see more of the potential for increased humidity and some wetting rains as we move towards the middle of the week. Winds will start decreasing as the trough starts to move across the northern Great Basin on Tuesday. However, still dry conditions will continue in northern and western areas. By Wednesday, this high is still taking hold over the central portion of the country, with that flux of moisture continuing to push north over mainly southern Nevada into Utah, and this return of lightning initially over the western areas will likely increase fire potential in Nevada as well. As we move into Thursday, that lightning threat continues over the eastern half of the Great Basin. However, lightning returns to southeast Idaho, and after several days of drier and warmer weather along with breezy winds, this will also continue to increase fire potential with the risk for lightning returning to these areas. Looking at the overall 7-day total amount of forecast precipitation, and you can see eventually we will start getting into some wetter conditions across Utah as those thunderstorms continue, especially towards the mid to late portion of next week. Again, early on, these thunderstorms will likely be on the drier side. We'll also see that precipitation creep into southern and eastern Nevada as thunderstorms develop, but again, the heavier amounts of precipitation will be further east. As we move into the later portion of July, we'll likely continue to see above normal temperatures, especially over the eastern half of the Great Basin, with above normal precipitation mainly across Utah as that monsoon moisture finally takes hold. However, as trophy conditions continue over the west coast, we'll see near normal temperatures and dry conditions, but also increases in wind. That concludes our briefing for today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you for listening.